Good morning and happy Sunday. Today we're going to begin the book of Revelation. We'll do a brief introduction, and I'm going to be heavily relying upon the book The Triumph of the Lamb by Dennis E. Johnson, really approaching Revelation the way he does in his chapters. So his first chapter deals with 7 principles for interpreting Revelation, and that's what we'll be looking at today. And then, Lord willing, next Sunday, we will go into the structure of the book of Revelation, which is his second chapter. So he gives 7 principles for helping to understand the book of Revelation. The first is that Revelation is written to reveal. That's the name. Apocalypto is the Greek word, and it means to take the cover off. Revelation really is about revealing. In the very first verse, it says, "The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place." Revelation, since it is written to reveal, is not written to confuse. That's not the purpose. Now, there are a lot of things in the book of Revelation that can confuse us, but that's not the purpose. So we can come to the book of Revelation saying, there must be a way to actually understand this, and to be able to understand it at least to a sufficient level of clarity that we can receive from it the encouragement and strengthening we are meant to receive. And we'll see more on that as we go through today. The second point is that it's a book to be seen, and I appreciate this thought. It says in verse 1 of Revelation 1, it says, "Which God gave him to show his servants the things that must soon take place." Then it says in verse 2, "Even to all that he saw." There's this idea that things are being revealed to John in visions, and then he's relaying these visions. So it's really a book of symbols that are visual. And the people who are originally going to be hearing this are hearing it. There wouldn't be very many copies, physical copies, for the early church. So they would be hearing it read aloud, and then they would be hearing it, but then seeing it visually through their imagination, seeing these images at work. And so there's just a lot of imagery that's going on, and imagery that helps to paint a picture that can be a little bit paradoxical at times. Let me give you a couple examples. One is the lion who is the lamb. So there's this point where John hears the Lion of the tribe of Judah has conquered, and then he turns and he looks and he sees a lamb standing as though it had been slain. Another one is a city, Babylon, who is pictured as a harlot, as a loose woman. And so you have these images that help to show that things are not always as they seem. And that's going to be a big thing in the book of Revelation, is symbolism and imagery. The third point is that Revelation heavily makes use of the Old Testament. Really, we need to know the Old Testament to be able to understand it. Now, it will reimagine or use the imagery of the Old Testament in some new ways, but we need to be familiar with the Old Testament. Let me just give you some examples. The beast. Well, if you've ever read the book of Revelation, you know that there's this beast from the sea and beast from the land. Well, one of the beasts, I can't remember which, is described as being like a lion, a leopard, and a bear. Well, there's 4 beasts in the book of Daniel chapter 7, and the first 3 are the lion, the bear, and the leopard. So there's clearly a tie in there. And that's the thing, is that it doesn't quote the Old Testament necessarily, but it alludes to it. A-L-L-U-D-E, allude, makes a reference to it. The 2 witnesses from Zechariah, we see these 2 witnesses in Revelation chapter 11, I believe. We have 2 witnesses in Zechariah 4. The tree of life, the serpent, from Genesis, plagues from Exodus, Balaam, Jezebel, Sodom and Gomorrah. And yet these are sometimes used in fresh ways. So we have to bring with it knowledge of the Old Testament, but also see, okay, what's the exact reference that's being used here? In what way is it like this over here back in the Old Testament? Number 4, numbers. Numbers are used a lot in the book of Revelation, especially 7, 10, and 12. 7 is usually to signal or symbolize completeness. Got 7 churches, 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls. The number 12 is related to the people of God, 12 tribes, 12 apostles. You're going to see 144,000 people in Revelation chapter 7. And that's 12 times 12,000. So this seems to be a number relating to the people of God. In fact, it's actually the numbering of 12 tribes. More on that as we get to that. Number 5, and this is perhaps one of the 2 most important points. Revelation is for a church under attack. That's a direct quote from Triumph of the Lamb, Dennis Johnson's book that we're working from. The main thrust of Revelation is to encourage and strengthen the church in the midst of tribulation. We see in Revelation chapter 6 that you have these saints who have been killed under the altar saying, "How long, O Lord?" It says in Revelation chapter 12, I believe, that they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives even so much as to shrink back from death. This is a heavy point, but there is persecution. There is suffering for the church of God. There was in that time, and there is still today. And so Revelation is written to the suffering church, also just the tempted church, because it's not always physical threat. Sometimes there's, as he makes note of in this chapter, spiritual deception and material seduction that are used by the enemy to weaken and cause his church to become compromised. And so the book of Revelation is written to induce the people of God, to encourage the people of God to faithfulness, to be faithful witnesses, not withdrawing from the world, but being faithful witnesses in the world, in the midst of it. And so we shouldn't get so focused in on just understanding what all of the different references mean, or all of the different timelines in Revelation, that we forget the heart of the message. Jesus wins, so stay faithful to him. Persevere. He's with us, and we are looking forward to a great celebration with him of his victory. More on that in a second. Number 6, Revelation concerns the things that must soon take place. So any interpretation of Revelation that almost completely removes the whole meaning of the book out of anything that would make sense, or anything that would encourage and help a first century audience, the 7 churches in Western Asia, Western Turkey really, should be kind of thought less of. We should let me just rephrase that. We should aim for an interpretation that is encouraging and would make sense of the fact that it says the things that must soon take place in verse 1. The time is near in verse 3. And then again at the end of the book, it says what must soon take place. And the fact that you've got 7 letters written to 7 churches in chapter 2 and 3. And then the rest of the book. Also in the end of the book, John is told not to seal up the book, for the time is near. And we'll deal a whole lot more with the temporal things as we get into it. But that point of, let's try to understand the book in light of a first century audience to whom it's written. Last point, the victory belongs to God. So Jesus wins. God wins. He's in control in the midst of the struggle. that the church goes through. This is the great encouragement. And the way that it's presented in the book of Revelation is so powerful. You have scenes like chapters 4 and 5, where you have this vision of worship in heaven. And then chapter 7, where people from every tribe and language and nation are gathered around the throne and around the Lamb and praising and worshiping. And then chapter 19, where you have the marriage supper of the Lamb. So you have these wonderful scenes of praise from which so many great hymns and songs have been written. And so that is the encouragement in the midst of all of this, so that it is written to show us that God has the victory. Yes, the church goes through great struggles, but God has the victory. So then may the Lord use this to encourage us as we begin to take a look at the book of Revelation. I do highly recommend the book The Triumph of the Lamb by Dennis E. Johnson as a kind of an easy introductory book from what I've read so far to help understand the book of Revelation. May the Lord give us grace